5, hardware. A lot of new users to FreeBSD often assume that if they go and buy the latest Wonder PC running the latest chipset, etc., that you just stick on FreeBSD and it will work as Windows does. And even Linux, which admittedly has a higher degree of hardware compatibility, will sometimes struggle with the latest developments in technology. So FreeBSD, having a little bit of lag behind Linux in this respect, will probably not work on your latest Ryzen PC or whatever it is nowadays. Where it does shine is in hardware that is slightly older, more familiar hardware. I mean, eventually the developers on FreeBSD will catch up with the drivers and will actually implement many of the features found in modern hardware, but it just takes time. And like I said, even in Linux, where more resources are put in, especially the big commercial vendors, say for instance Ubuntu or Red Hat, even they are not always on the cutting edge of the latest stuff. So when it comes to hardware, it's really best to, I would suggest, use anything, if you must, on pre-built systems, anything from HP or IBM or Lenovo, anything like that, they have a pretty good track record of running very well with FreeBSD. And if you go for a more independent, say for instance System 76, now they have a fantastic track record of running Linux already pre-installed. So there's a good chance that anything by them that actually runs Linux, or any other machine that actually runs Linux perfectly, will probably run FreeBSD as well. The biggest problem I've noticed is laptops. Now there's a certain amount of incompatibility floating around for FreeBSD and Wi-Fi. It's not perfect in Linux, and it's worse in FreeBSD. But in the case, there are some chipsets which are guaranteed to work with FreeBSD. So what I would suggest is that maybe buy a separate dongle and use that as your Wi-Fi. Even better if you can use Ethernet. But if that's not possible, then just a little tried and trusted dongle. I'll leave a link down below of a hardware compatibility page, and that will list all the chipsets and various whatnots which run or are known to run with FreeBSD. With graphics cards, there's not a problem with FreeBSD. I can't speak 100% for AMD cards. I've not run one of them for years, or Radeon cards. I've not run one of them for years. I mainly use NVIDIA, and as far as NVIDIA goes with FreeBSD, there's not a problem at all. The official NVIDIA drivers from the FreeBSD repositories are slightly older. Doesn't mean that they don't work, but they're slightly older. But you can, of course, go to the main NVIDIA website and download a tar package, and then just run, not a tar package, just a run file. This is like a script. You can just do that, and it will install the drivers for you. There's a little bit more work involved than just simply PKG or Portmaster in it. But if that's what you want, if you want the latest ones, then that's certainly something to consider. But no, as far as graphics cards, there's really not a problem there. Sound hasn't been a problem with FreeBSD for a long time. So many onboard sound drivers, onboard, it's not a problem. So hardware it can be an issue. Sometimes printers, well, it depends on the printer. I really have good luck with Samsung and HP. I've had a HP 1020 for, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, I don't know. I've had it a long time. It's a laser printer. It works flawlessly. And even if you do have problems with FreeBSD accessing printers, well, one solution would be, I don't know, it's not ideal, but get a little Raspberry Pi, bung Raspbian on it, and use that as a printer server. It's minimal power, and you could access it using cups. So that's the solution. So yeah, there's that. Keyboard and mouse, of course, there's never no problem there. But again, it's all about if you resource your hardware, do a little bit of homework, just check overall before taking the plunge into FreeBSD. You'll find that if, say, for instance, you want to build your own system, you make sure the parts, just check the database and ask about on the FreeBSD forums. Hell, you can even come on this channel and ask. You can put together a system that will be fast, reliable, and will run FreeBSD just perfectly. Number 4, hand-holding. FreeBSD, like some flavors of Linux, use the command line a lot. There are some Linux distributions which keep the command line and the terminal to a minimum. But FreeBSD has never forgotten its Unix roots, and that in the sense that the terminal is an essential part. So right from the get-go, as soon as you've installed FreeBSD, you will just get a terminal session. It's just flashing cursor, you log in, that's it. And that can be extremely off-putting. But that's its strength, because it allows you to, you can learn and grow and develop your skills with FreeBSD. And not just FreeBSD. If you learn it on FreeBSD, then you can they're easily transferable skills into Linux. The similarities between the two are extraordinarily close. There are key differences, of course. Directory structures, some commands, little things. The philosophy behind them can differ too. FreeBSD, to a certain extent, is very much it's still Unix at heart. It has an indirect heritage of over 40 years, but even though it was officially named FreeBSD 26 years ago, it has a heritage much longer than that, and it's never forgotten these roots. And as such, there's very no Windows creep, as it were, no Windows S creep. And what I mean by that is, I remember many years ago when I used Mandrake Linux. I thought it was wonderful. I was just starting to learn about Linux. I tried to install Red Hat previously, and that never went well. But when Mandrake came along, oh my goodness me, it did everything for you. It literally did hold your hand. It made Linux so accessible that even someone with no experience could just pop in the CD, DVD, load it up, and install. It was brilliant. And of course, then later on, Ubuntu then, filled them shoes left vacant when Mandrake was no longer around, or no longer what it used to be. But you don't get that FreeBSD. FreeBSD, you install the base, and on top of that, you can then install the things that you need and leave out the stuff that you don't. I've heard people install virtues of Arch, etc. And while Arch, it may be great, it looks really overly complicated to install. It's like you put loads of effort in to get, in my opinion, not much back. FreeBSD, in my opinion, gives you a nice medium. The install is not so difficult once you get used to it. And once you actually get past the initial, you don't do this is strange, you don't do it like this, you don't do it like that. Once you get past that, it gives you the power and the freedom to create what you want, the system that you want, without all that the hassle and the headache of what Arch may be. I know I've never installed Arch, and I really have no interest. And such, because you can build a system up yourself, there's no software center. One of the most, for me personally, looking in the Linux world, one of the most irritating things was, it was fine at the beginning, I suppose, in one or two of the user-friendly distributions of Linux, but the software center really started to irritate me, because Synaptic was always a perfect, to me, if you wanted a GUI package manager, Synaptic was not wrong. There's not wrong with it. Say, for instance, Debian, which I used to use Debian and enjoyed it greatly. apt-get on the command line is brilliant. It does everything you need. It's very powerful. If you didn't like that and you wanted a GUI alternative, then Synaptic was your best bet. But for some people, and I don't know when this happened or why this happened, but for some people, that wasn't enough. It wasn't friendly enough. It wasn't Disney-fied enough. It wasn't cartoonish enough. And suddenly you got the welcome screen and Software Center bundled together. And I don't see the point, because it's not so difficult just to fire up Synaptic and then just search what you want. That's not for me. That's design choices by the people who made the distros, and that's fine. But yeah, people who perhaps come to FreeBSD expect it to automatically have installed everything for you. A nice little desktop environment pops up, and then they expect the Software Center to zoom into the faces. And that's not going to happen, and it doesn't happen. As far as help goes, the FreeBSD forums, some people may complain that perhaps they're a bit elitist or they're a little bit dismissive. The FreeBSD forums is a great source of help, and the people on there are some of the cleverest people that you'll ever meet. But the rules of the forums are that, see, for me it doesn't matter, but for them it does, and it keeps an orderly house, an orderly ship. You have to format your question properly and ask it in a professional manner. Everything's very professional. And so if you ask it in the right way and you're courteous and the question is clear, you will get a clear and courteous answer. If your question is, I don't know, why is FreeBSD rubbish and why can't I do this? Then you will either get ignored, and this is the same as IRC. You will either get ignored or you'll get a terse answer asking you to rephrase it. And I have not a problem with that, because then it does get you into a certain mindset of thinking about what the problem is and how you ask the questions. It's otherwise you get chaos. And for some new users, they may think that no help is available because they've gone to this forum and in their minds being treated this way. But it's really not the case. And besides, there's plenty of other help available if you don't wish. You can go on this channel, for instance. I'll try and help you the best I can. If I don't know the answer, then I'll try and look it up for you, and I'll spend a good few hours looking at all the source material and everything I can to try and find you the answer. And even if you don't want to do that, then there is a source of help available in all FreeBSDs. It's in Linux as well, and it's something which is, I don't know, kind of overlooked. Perhaps it's not flashy enough, perhaps it's not sexy enough, but that is the man pages, or the manual pages. They're a source of help which almost everything about your system has got a little man page about it, which will then clue you in how to use it, the syntax and all the rest. So while FreeBSD doesn't hold your hand, it can provide you signposts in which to find the answers that you want. And I think finally, FreeBSD is not GhostBSD. Many people they'll get FreeBSD, they'll load it up, and be completely shocked that it's not Linuxy enough for them. A GhostBSD, I've had an on and off kind of relationship with them for a while. Some of my earlier reviews of the system is probably not. I'm not going to endear myself to the FreeBSD developers. They've not come on my channel saying, "Oh, fantastic review," because I think some of my earlier reviews were less than flattering, and the reason for that was I was always a little bit skeptical about how you were trying to Ubuntuize, for a better word, FreeBSD. Try to turn it into something it's not. It promises something that it can never deliver. And as good as FreeBSD is, and as good as GhostBSD is, it can never be Ubuntu. It can never be Windows. In the same way that Ubuntu can never be Windows, GhostBSD can never be Ubuntu. It's a different environment, and you have to think in a certain way when you approach FreeBSD. It's more logically laid out. It's more true to the Unix way. But GhostBSD tries. There's nothing wrong with the project. I do greatly enjoy the later versions, but they try to promise new Linux users a Linuxy way of doing things in a BSD world, and it doesn't always work. For instance, you're not going to find the same support for Steam or Netflix or the AAA games. I don't know what is available for Linux on AAA games, but you certainly won't find them on FreeBSD, and certainly not GhostBSD. So GhostBSD might look the part, it loads up very nice, but when it comes to it, a new Linux user will not find the same experience. So FreeBSD is not GhostBSD. FreeBSD is a base system. Once you install it, it's for yours to assemble. So it doesn't hold your hand, it doesn't assume you're an idiot, it gives you loads of choices. If you don't want to go in, you just want a command line operating system with all the N-cursors, tools, etc. You can have that. It's not a problem. I've done that. I have servers running which doesn't have a GUI on it. Some people may say, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with having a GUI on the server." I disagree. I think you can have a web server that will serve out a like web page command thing to remote clients. But I don't think the server itself needs a GUI, needs a desktop. It doesn't. I don't think it does. So that it can do that. And FreeBSD makes an excellent desktop, but you have to work at it. You have to do a little bit of tweaking. And that's all part of it. It's just, that's what I love about it. Once it's done, it's done. I have this system that I use now as my main desktop. And I'll do a kind of like desktop setup walkthrough video in a bit, because I've had the channel for 2 years, and one of my practically the first video that I ever did on this channel was I did a quick rundown of the desktop I use using Motif Window Manager on, I think it might have been FreeBSD 11 or FreeBSD 11.1, I can't remember. But nothing's changed. My desktop is the same as it was 2 years ago. The menu obviously changes, you add things, take things away. But I have upgraded from 11, 11.1, 11.2. 11.2 went a bit funny, but then I upgraded to 12, and that's it. My system works perfectly. It's got set up the way I want it to be. No one held my hand to do it. I worked it all out myself, and it's a great experience to learn it yourself. So yeah, FreeBSD is not GhostBSD. There's plenty of help available the Unix way using man pages, and on the forums as well. There's no software center needed. We'll get into the package management later on in the video, but there's no software center needed. You don't need no one to show you nice pretty pictures. If you know what software it is and you know what it does, and if you're coming to FreeBSD from Linux, then you will know what you're wanting or what stuff you use. And then FreeBSD uses the command line a lot. It hasn't forgotten its Unix roots, and there's no Windows creep. And that says it all, really. Number 3, expecting Windows or Linux. This kind of ties in as well to the previous one, number 4, in the sense that a lot of new users to FreeBSD expect a computer that runs Windows or Linux to just work. And again, it ties into number 5. It's to do with hardware. Many stuff in FreeBSD does work. It just works perfectly. I've really never had a problem, like I say, apart from scanners and printers. But it's not a major problem. There's always a solution available. And I think if you come to FreeBSD, you have a certain reason to come to FreeBSD. And if that reason is strong enough, you can do it out of curiosity, sure, but if you have a reason, like a philosophical reason or a practical reason, if you have a reason to come to FreeBSD, then something like the printer or the scanner not working, you will either forgive and just move on and do something else, or you'll find a solution, either a solution in FreeBSD if you're good at coding, or a solution by, say, for instance, using a scanner server or a printer server. And that's what I did. If you really want to use FreeBSD, you will find a way to use it. If your Wi-Fi doesn't work, get a dongle or use Ethernet. I only use Ethernet. There's always a way. So expecting a computer that runs Windows and Linux to just work, you might be lucky. You have a, I don't know, 80% chance, 80 to 20. But again, not every Linux distribution will work straight out of the thing for every new piece of hardware or for any computer. Computer that runs Windows fantastically, put Linux on it, there may be a problem with video, problem with sound. It just might not work. I've got my main system here is an AMD FX 8350, I think. It's got 32 gigabytes of RAM, DDR3. It's nothing fantastic. It's 8 cores. It's not a weedy computer by any stretch, but there are some. I tried a Linux live DVD. It came on a magazine, I think, a couple of weeks back. Wouldn't do it. It just wouldn't work. It wouldn't boot up. Black screen, nothing. And this is with a nice NVIDIA card. I can't remember I think it was like 750 or something like that. It just wouldn't work with it. With FreeBSD, I never had no problem. So, and then again, I tried another Linux distro, and that worked. So, even with Linux, there's a certain degree of hit and miss, and with FreeBSD, that is. So, expecting a computer that runs Windows or Linux to just work is not going to happen. Again, almost tying into the number 5 is hardware and expecting it to work. FreeBSD isn't Linux and it's not Windows. And again, it's to do with drivers. Windows will have the latest drivers. Some of them drivers are pretty messed up from the manufacturers themselves, OEM disks. Linux will have slightly more drivers already being built in, especially if they're open source or back engineered for whatever, reverse engineered. And FreeBSD probably won't. So what might work on the Linux won't necessarily work in FreeBSD, and what might work in Windows won't necessarily work in Linux. You have to approach each one with an open mind and a new perspective. I've had a few comments over the times suggesting that maybe, can FreeBSD play games? Can FreeBSD run Netflix? And Ubuntu can, or Red Hat can, and stuff like that. And well, then fine, they can, and that's brilliant. I would suggest if you value them things, then use them. But I pointed out to these people that AAA games run by Windows, does that run on your Linux? And I get silence. And because the answer is no. If you want a truly 100% user-friendly, that's debatable, user-friendly experience with compatibility and the latest things, viruses of course, then run Windows. Many of the gamers and streamers on Twitch actually run Windows for a reason. Wider choice of games and hardware. Then brilliant, run Windows. I've nothing against Windows. Some people vehemently hate Windows. I don't hate Windows. I actually think that Windows 10 is, I'm probably in the minority here, but Windows 10 is fairly decent. It's not bad. Certainly better than Windows 8. Windows 7 and Windows 2000 are my favorites. And if you want a happy medium of more games available, Steam, client, Netflix, lack of viruses, stability, then run Linux. But each one of these particular operating systems, you have to have a mindset of why you're using it and what you expect out of it. Worst thing in the world is like a Windows user goes over to Linux and berates Linux because it can't do this, it doesn't do that, it hasn't got this. Not understanding that you've made a conscious choice to move over to Linux, a completely different operating system. And it's the same way to FreeBSD. FreeBSD it will behave wonderfully for you. You will have a system that is stable. They don't make outlandish choices. Ubuntu. They do things very conservatively. They don't change for change's sake. Things will move very slow. If you like the cutting edge and bleeding edge and brilliant, and FreeBSD is not going to be the one for you. You can have access to some of the latest software via ports, of course. If you use it, you follow the latest branch, and that will give you the latest software and applications if you need it. But FreeBSD itself moves slowly. Very, very few changes are introduced for change's sake. Just that you have to roll your sleeves up, do a little bit of digging. And also thinking that FreeBSD can be a Linux alternative. Well, it can be, but it's not Linux in the sense that while there is a very active community, it's not on the same scale as what's available for Linux. It's just not the way it is. FreeBSD is something which is chosen by the big companies to use. Netflix and PlayStation and all the usual ones. They chose FreeBSD for its licensing, its freedom. The FreeBSD license is extremely permissive. The GPL2 and the GPL3, GPL3 is almost not really universally liked, but the GPL2, that require you to make the source available, and any changes that you do to the source then has to be passed on and made available to everyone else. And companies tend not to, if they enhance Linux a bit, add some things to it, and they have to make that available, they're kind of like reticent, really. It's like, we don't want to. With FreeBSD, you don't have to do that. FreeBSD has a license, which means that as long as you credit, it's like a two-line license or a 3-point license, depends on which version. That if you credit the FreeBSD developers and put the copyright at the beginning, then basically that's fine. That's all you need. You don't need to distribute the code again if you don't need to. You can, as a company, you can take the FreeBSD code, you can enhance it with all the latest dingly-danglies, package it in as your product. Fine. There is nothing wrong with that. I think that's the fundamental difference between FreeBSD and Linux, and obviously Windows, of course, that you don't have to distribute the code. You can if you want, and companies like Sony have, and Apple to a certain extent, have contributed back into the ecosystem because it benefits them in the end. If they make any changes and they make things run a bit smoother, then they put stuff back and it feeds back to them anyway. I mean, even Microsoft made some changes to, I think it was like FreeBSD 10.3. They made some changes to FreeBSD 10.3, improved its netcode for their Azure platform. And that's the bizarre thing about that one is actually FreeBSD had excellent netcode. It always has done. Better than Linux. And Microsoft originally took that as far as the basis for their earlier Windows releases. The actual netcode from FreeBSD, who then updated it and then fed it back into FreeBSD later. So it's So yes, you can contribute back if you wish, and even if you don't wish, if you made some changes which we don't want to release it, they contribute financially. And Netflix has been very generous to FreeBSD Foundation over the years. So yeah, there are a lot of similarities between FreeBSD and Linux, but FreeBSD is not Linux. Not Linux in the size of the user base. It's not Linux in the restrictive nature of the license. It's not Linux or Windows in the sense that you have access to all the Netflix and AAA games. But I managed to get Steam working on FreeBSD. It's not a problem. And that's really not that much difference to what's available now on Linux regarding Steam. It's not that much difference. So yeah, FreeBSD is not Linux in the same way that Linux is not Windows. It can be a philosophical reason for you to change, but you have to think differently. Oh, and that's a slogan from a well-known company, isn't it? Think differently. Number 2, giving up. Now this is a funny one because new experiences can be daunting, and you can, and I speak from personal experience here, that I used to, when I first started out with FreeBSD, I hadn't got a clue what I was doing. I bunged in the CD, the DVD, and I installed. It's like, what the hell is this? This didn't do this. Wipe this. Stop that. That didn't work. And do you know, I'd run back to Linux, and Similarly, when I was going from Windows to Linux, I would do the same thing. I'd run back to Windows if things didn't work in Linux. It's a natural thing. You think, I can't be bothered with this. And you go back to your comfort zone. And the temptation to do that in an age of distro hopping is high. Say, for instance, for whatever reason you no longer want to use Windows, that's fine. It's good to move on. And you find Linux, you find a distro which you really like, and it's easy and everything works. It's brilliant. Just out of the box, everything. There's no terminal, there's no installation that you can see. You just point, click, 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 and it's installed. Brilliant. But maybe it's not not the most stablest of operating system. Maybe it keeps on crashing. Maybe they haven't got the latest browser. Everything else is really nice, looks fantastic, and almost Windows in its theming and stuff like that. And they don't have this, or they don't have that, and you start to get cheesed off. So you distro hop to a new one, and then you keep on hopping until eventually you want to get work done. You've got to get work done. You can't keep wiping it off and reinstalling and backing up. It's like, So you think, well, I'm going to try FreeBSD. And then you have this wonderful, stable operating system that moves at the speed of a glacier, but provides stability and security, and you can get work done on it. But and this is a big but. It doesn't quite do what you want it to do. You plug in a USB stick, note pops up. You think, okay. You want to watch something, it won't play the video. All these things are actually achievable once you dig into it, but not out of the box. Not even when you first install a desktop environment. And so you start to get bitter. You start to think, I'm not doing this. I want to go back to Linux. It worked on Linux. And so they do. You just load in either the same distribution that which you came over from, or a new one. And this new one is full of bells and whistles, and it's all glossy and lovely, and everything's shiny, and it's just it's got wallpapers and icons, and it's just. And that's sometimes when I see reviews of Linux, that's all. It's got lovely wallpaper, it's got lovely icons. Oh my goodness me! You're looking at the desktop environment, not the operating system. The operating system doesn't have desktop and icons. Oh well, and wallpapers. So anyway, you go back to that, and then you do a bit more hopping. Then you get again cheesed off, and you come back to Linux. So, in an age of distro hopping, it's so much easier just to run. I think for me. I found it easy just to. I can't remember back now, but I think I just like. It's a certain thing. Is like you burn your bridges. Not britches, bridges. In case the Americans are listening, I don't burn my pants. And you kind of. There's no going back. Do you know what I mean? It kind of like I thought, to hell with this. I'm gonna learn this. So on my main piece, I backed up all my information and text files and receipts and pictures and whatnot. I reformatted the drive into UFS, imported everything back into again, and I jolly well learnt it because I had no choice. I didn't have any other DVDs. I got rid of ISOs. I got rid of any install media. It was either Windows, it was FreeBSD, and I wanted to use FreeBSD at the time, and I learnt it. I actually rolled up my sleeves and learnt it. And then it became easier. I understood how things were slotted together, how this worked and why that didn't work, but if you did this, it made that work, and so on and so forth. So yeah. Again, as I alluded to in the previous one, there's many sources of help for FreeBSD. Many sources of help. Other users are the greatest source of it. Many subscribers to this channel, users on the FreeBSD forums, they are an immense resource, huge resource that you can take advantage of. Not use, not in a bad sense, but they're there. They'll offer the information and the help and their life experiences free for nothing. And there's nothing like asking people who have actually been there and done it. What do you think? This is what happened. What did you do? Etc. etc. You don't. I don't know. I'm speaking generally here, but you don't there's no sense of community in Windows. It seems like it. I mean, there probably is, but it's not that I've noticed. There's plenty of information around, of course, official information, books and like that. But when it comes to solid community, there doesn't seem to be that much there. There's no cohesive community as such. Linux is really much is a community. And again, I'm not sure about the book-wise or official information. Again, you see, because there's so many different Linux distributions, information can be, it might not apply to one, it might not apply to that. Yeah, this is what is a great advantage to FreeBSD. There's only one FreeBSD. No, you got GhostBSD and all, but there's one FreeBSD. They're called GhostBSD. That's called NetBSD. That's called OpenBSD. They're not. That's not FreeBSD. You don't get FreeBSD Lite or Ubuntu FreeBSD, and you get FreeBSD. So any information that you're searching for FreeBSD is only about FreeBSD, and the handbook has some of the best information. Some of it can be a little bit older, and I might actually offer my services to update it. But it contains everything you need, and it just pertains to FreeBSD. And of course, you've got man pages, as mentioned earlier. But the biggest philosophy, I think, is that if you learn once, either learn Windows, then learn Linux, you can learn again. You're not incapable. None of us are incapable of learning something. You know, they're all you know, it's like Tom of being, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Nonsense. You can learn anything at any age. Human race is constantly learn and relearn again throughout the ages to do things. Of course, if we didn't, we'd be stagnating right now. Some say we are, but, you know, that's a different thing. So you can learn it. You can learn the operating system. You can learn the installation. And once you've learned it enough, once you've gone to the old memory in the head, it comes to second nature to you. It really does. It's a strange thing when I see people, either in videos or commenting online, that they find that the idea of using the terminal is difficult. I mean, my goodness me, you know, I'm old enough and ugly enough to. I was there, the sort of like the start of the home computer revolution, especially in the UK. We had a huge range of computers, wonderful systems, and you switched them on, nothing happened. You just got beep, and then it would just get this flashing cursor, usually sometimes with an OK above it, or a ready, depends on your system. The BBC Micro, I think. And it didn't do anything until you either put in a special keyword, or you loaded up a game, or you typed in your program, then saved it in BASIC. It didn't do anything. It didn't hold your hand. It didn't do any of these things. But we didn't give up. We just, you got on with it. You learned it. And even if it was only a matter of, if it was only a matter of becoming very proficient in how to load up Frogger, you still remember the commands. I think on the Dragon 32, it was either C load for cassette load, or D load for disk load, and you put an M on it for machine code loading. So it was either basic or machine code, either from the disk or cassette. See, even now I remember that. I think the BBC Micro, I think it was asterisk chain. I could be wrong on that, or chain M or something like that. Yeah. So I do remember. You do learn. I think people forget. Along came Windows, point and click. No longer need to learn these things, and to a certain extent become mollycoddled. Now, Linux, some Linux anyway, and FreeBSD certainly, they drop you into the old school, old mentality. And for some people, it's going to be difficult going back. You used to point. It's like if you used to make all your own meals, which I do, and then you get used to eating ready meals in the microwave. And then something happens to the microwave. You have to then make your meals again. Someone's like, oh, I don't want to do that. Because you forget. But it's there, and you're capable of learning it again. If you learned it before, you can learn it again. And that's how I look at it. There's nothing worse, there's nothing more head-scratching to me to see people who they refuse, oh, it's got terminal, or I don't know how to fix this, and they give up. You give up. You're never going to learn if you give up. Goodness me. Once you do learn, there's a whole world out there of things that you can Like I say, transferable skills from FreeBSD to Linux. There you go. And vice versa. If you're of the mindset to learn these things in Linux, then you'll fit on FreeBSD just fine. If you fit in FreeBSD, you learn these things, then you can move back to Linux in a more advanced level. Almost like, imagine FreeBSD is almost like a teacher. It will teach you how to do things the Unixy way, So you might start out on a nice hand-holding friendly GUI Linux. You think, I've had enough of this, I'm going to go on to FreeBSD. You learn FreeBSD. Then you think, actually, no, I think I'll go back to Linux. But then you'll go back to Arch Linux or some other so-called harder distros. And you wouldn't have done that if you hadn't have gone to FreeBSD. That's just, that's what I've seen people do that. So, right, and that brings us on to the final one, which is package management. Again, it's all tied. It's all tied together. The package management in Windows, what you tend to do is for the latest software, you'll go to the actual the developer's homepage, download it, install it, and hopefully it works, and hopefully it hasn't infected your system. Of course, there's the Microsoft Store. I think that's what you call it. There's not a right lot on there. It's not fantastic. Regarding Linux, you've got all the various repositories for the various distros, and then you've got Snaps. Oh, Snaps and whichever the other ones are called, but they're all based upon the same thing. Absolutely terrible. And PPAs as well. Oh my goodness. The number of users I've seen use PPAs, or there's a distro. I don't want to name him. I don't want to name his distro, but the theming is basically nearly all white, and it looks like Windows. Yeah, it's got a little bird as its logo. Oh my goodness, that particular distribution is so cram-packed full of PPAs. I don't even know. I don't suppose I nearly swore then. I don't suppose that he even knows what is in it. That he'd probably lose track of himself of what is installed. And that's in order to get all the themes and various little bits that he needs to make the distribution look the way it does and behave in the way it does. And that is it really is a security risk. If someone puts something malicious in there and you wouldn't know. The number of websites where it says just copy this, and they want you to blindly copy it in, and why? Why would you do that? And I wouldn't just personally go in and download any old Windows thing, because you're probably going to get a virus. Brilliant. In the same way that some PPAs or other things, there's an opportunity there for something malicious to get onto your system. Anyway, with FreeBSD, you don't get that. You get two main ways. You can download the tar file, but I don't know how many people that do. There is PKG for the pre-built binary packages, pre-compiled packages if you wish, and then there's ports. The ports are basically a little script which will it will automatically fetch the source from the developer's site, apply some FreeBSD-isms, as it were, and then compile it and install it into your system. And it is safe. It's a lot safer than using PPAs or just downloading blindly, which you should never do. So you've got that, and I say you got the PKG, which is the pre-compiled packages, and that is the main way you install software in FreeBSD. There's no pretty little GUI, although there is OctoPKG if you really do need a GUI to install something. But you go to PKG search, and part of the keyword for whatever you're looking for will find it. And PKG info will tell you about it. So on and so forth. So everything you can do in the command line, and it's catered for in FreeBSD. It's a wonderful, especially, it was always been good, but since they introduced the PKG NG for next generation, it's been even better. And because FreeBSD, this may change, but hopefully it doesn't. They separate the main base system from the user land. So FreeBSD -update fetch will fetch the latest security updates for your base system and upgrade it. And then FreeBSD -update install will install your updates. Give all the latest security patches, and etc., etc. That's kept separate from your user land, which is seen to by its PKG and ports. I use Portmaster because it takes care of the cleaning up and the install and all the rest and the upgrading. It just takes care of that. Again, it's not wanting to use the command line to update and install software. Well, you could get away with using the Octo PKG in FreeBSD, but it's a lot quicker just to open up the terminal and away you go. I think you're really not going to enjoy FreeBSD if you're not going to willing to open up the terminal. It really, it's not Ubuntu. You need to open up that terminal. And some software is seen as slightly older. Case of the drivers, the video drivers. Well, older doesn't necessarily mean worse. Some of the older software in FreeBSD, and not a lot of it this applies. It's not all the software is old. There's a lot of newer software, and as long as it's getting security fixes and bug fixes, then it really doesn't matter. If it's got, obviously, if it's missing some features that you want, well, and FreeBSD doesn't scratch that itch, then, moving back to Linux is perhaps the option, or running it in VirtualBox. Either, run a Linux session in VirtualBox, or use Wine. Or, and I've managed to do this on a couple of occasions, use the Linuxulator, or Linuxulator, I love that word, which is the Linux ABI, and which allows you to run some Linux software natively as if you were running a FreeBSD version. Then you can have if it works for you, then you can have the Linux version, but So because some software is older doesn't mean it's any worse. And FreeBSD is not too bad when it comes to the data software. Like I say, if you're running ports and you're tracking the latest developments, do a port snap, fetch the latest ones, all the latest software is there for you. I've installed on this system some Plasma, which is even newer than what's just been on Debian 10, which has just been released. I think the Debian 10 one is 5.14 or something like that. I got 5.16, I think. So, And no PPA support. Well, again, like I said earlier, PPAs, it's a great concept. But if you need PPAs in order to fill that gap that's missing from your operating system, then you're doing it wrong. It should be available via a tried and trusted repository, either officially or unofficially. I think the Debian one had a multimedia one, I can't remember. I'm sure it became part of the official ones later, but that to me is all right. It's more trustworthy. But a random PPA somewhere, I don't know what Ubuntu was thinking when they did that. And it's not a good solution. Anyway, I've talked for a long time and my voice is starting to go. This is a really strange video for me. It was kind of like a list, but it ended up as a long monologue, really. I'm not going to be doing this again, or probably not. It's almost like a combination of a podcast, a 5 things, or a monologue. Yes, really strange. Anyhow, that's all I have to say. If you think my choices are wrong, which they probably are, and you probably do, then please leave a comment down below. If you liked this content, then please consider subscribing and hit that bell notification thingamabob for latest updates so you don't miss out. And I will see you later and catch you next time. Thanks for watching.